Hi Quilty friends, welcome back to the Frosty quilt. We're almost done with the Frosty block himself. So it's getting exciting. We are at the top of page 3, the candy cane stem section, steps 1 to 4. Okay, so this is what we have. You're going to have these pieces right here. This piece started out 1.5 by 11.5, and I've added a piece here. This piece started out as a 2-inch square that I cut on the diagonal. These are 1 by 1.5, and this is 1.25 by 12.5. Okay, so again, the same exact thing you did in the last section when you did this. It's the same exact size. So what you'll do is mark the corner with an X that you want to take off, and then cut it with your corner pop ruler. Okay, and you'll be cutting right here the 3/4, just like you did the last time. So cut the corner off, sew this on, kind of centered, as centered as you can get it. Remember, this doesn't have to be a scant 1/4 inch is what we're using to sew our seams. And then press the seam open and trim it down using the 3/4 mark on your ruler right here between 1.5 and 1 that are marked. The one that looks like Morse code, dots and dashes. Okay, so now you'll have this piece. We're going to sew one of these to each end. Okay, so let's do that. Keep your raw edges right together, and remember this is going to be a scant 1/4 inch. So I don't want to see any fabric beyond the edge of my foot here. Whenever you have this many pieces going together, then it's important that your 1/4 inch is really a scant 1/4 inch. But like I told you before, they're all nice and short, so if you do have to take them out, it's not that big a deal. Okay, right sides together, and be careful because the gray can look a little the same on both sides. So be sure you have right sides together. Okay, now we're going to press these seams. This one can pretty much be pressed any way you want. I'm going to press mine open, but you can press it to one side if you prefer. And this one, I'm going to press toward the background square so that this lays flat when I do that. I've got a thread here. Okay, now this piece gets sewn to this piece. Okay, and this piece is what I need it to be, 12.5. So if this piece is too short, at this point you want to adjust these seams so that it comes out and is 12.5. If they're a little bit long, it won't matter. You'll be able to trim them off because, as you see, there's background all the way around Frosty. So if we had to trim a little bit, that's not a problem. But if it's not big enough, that is a problem. So now we're going to sew this. I'm going to keep my raw edges together and sew it with that nice scant 1/4 inch. Okay, next we're going to talk about before we sew the 3 sections together. because we're almost there. Uh-oh, my camera person has got a tickle in their throat. We got lots of stray ones here. That one doesn't want to cut. Okay, so let's press this. And I'm going to press this toward the background strip because the background strip is just a whole strip. It doesn't have any seams in it. So it'll lay flat. Okay, this is just a tiny bit longer, but that doesn't matter because this is 12.5 and that's what I need it to be. Okay, so let's talk about these 3 sections now. We need these 3 sections to, when we sew it together, it has to be a 12.5 inch square. So we need them to be 12.5 this way. Now, we're not going to worry about this because this is actually a coping strip. And what a coping strip is, it's a piece added so that if necessary, it can be trimmed to make the block the amount it's supposed to be. So we don't have to be quite as worried about it being 12.5 this direction, but we do need it to be 12.5 this direction. So measure all of your sections and make sure they're 12.5, because if they're not, now is a great time to figure out what can I adjust to make it be 12.5. Okay, and there's very easy places. This is the hardest one to adjust. On this one, it would be these, but we took care of that because we knew this piece was 12.5 when we started. So as long as it matches up, we're good. And remember, if you've got a little bit hanging over the edges, that's okay. Just trim it up straight. Okay, on this piece, if you don't get 12.5, you can very easily go back and let this seam out a tiny bit or this seam a tiny bit, or however much you need. So you have 2 seams that are very easily adjusted to take care of the fact that it isn't 12.5. Again, remember, if it's more than 12.5, that's okay because this is all background and you can trim a tiny little bit. Now, if this piece isn't 12.5, now you have to look at where isn't it 12.5? Is it here in the brim section or is it here in the top hat section? If it's in the brim section, just take this out back to here and leave this out a little bit. Okay? If it's in the, and then put it back. If it's in the top hat section, then you'll have to take it out this far and leave this seam out. Okay? If it's really off and you need more than one seam, then I would just take this loose and leave both these seams out a little bit. Okay? You can't let your seams get generous. Okay, once you have those adjusted to be 12.5, then sew this to this and this to this, and then all you have to do is take and put this on here and make sure this is 12.5, and if it's a little bit more, which let's see, okay, then you just trim a little bit here and make it 12.5. Okay, because remember this is a coping strip and it's easy to be able to trim it off. The other thing is, if this seems like this isn't nice and square, you can trim this up a little bit because you've got that little bit extra down here. Now you only have about 1/4 inch extra, not a whole lot. So you can't trim a lot, but you can trim a little bit. So this way we have this coping strip that helps us, but this way we've got to keep these pieces 12.5. So now you can finish up all 14 of your Frosty blocks, and when you come back for the next section, we'll be making the brooms.